you're quite pessimistic about what happens next year. Why?
Well, because the government can continue to double down on its failed policies. The Federal Reserve, when confronted with the economic slowdown that resulted from COVID, the proper monetary policy response would have been to contract money supply because it was quite obvious the economy was shutting down, businesses were not producing, factories were closing, workers were being furloughed. So there was a big decline in supply. We needed a decline in demand to go along with that. But instead, the Fed did the opposite of what it needed to do. It expanded money supply to fuel demand. As supply was going down, the natural consequence was a surge in prices. Yeah. And unfortunately, they're getting ready to double down on the same failed policy.
And what happens in the US affects us all. So how might that affect Australia? Do you still see gold as the traditional safe haven?
Well, the Reserve Bank of Australia made a similar mistake. I mean, central banks all around the world were printing money, expanding the supply when they should have been contracting it. So inflation is not just an American problem, it's a global problem. And obviously, everybody needs to hedge against that inflation. And so it's not just Americans that should be buying gold, Australians should be buying it as well.
Okay, just gold? Are there other non-traditional safe havens that you're looking at? Dare I say cryptocurrency?
Well, there's no safety in cryptocurrency, so that's for speculators. And I think in the long run, that's a bad speculative bet to make. But you want to own real assets. I mean, gold is just one way to hedge inflation. But there are a lot of ways to do that. You don't want to own any paper. You don't want to be a creditor. So you want to own real assets. You want to own businesses, property, plant, and equipment, real resources. So I buy a lot of common stocks. I mean, a lot of stocks are under pressure right now. And so there's some buying opportunities in this environment because people still don't understand where we're headed. Central banks will destroy the value of currency, in particular, the value of the US dollar. And so that's very bullish for a lot of these real assets that are right now dropping as investors are, reacting reflexively to the news that's unfolding.
Yeah, indeed. Now, Peter, I think, history does show that recessions can come 2 or 3 years after economic shocks. Why is that? And is this going to change anything? Should we expect that in the next couple of years as well?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the foolish policy response by central banks. They always sow the seeds for the next downturn by the way they artificially stimulate each recession. The government comes and they print more money and they create even greater distortions in the economy, artificially suppress interest rates, inflate asset prices. And so all of those booms sow the seeds for the next bust. But instead of the Fed and other central banks acknowledging their culpability in creating these busts, they go back and repeat the same policy mistakes that caused them. And then, of course, now they're setting up an even bigger collapse the next time. And I think ultimately they're going to destroy the value of currency, in particular the US dollar. And I think the world is going to be forced to return to a gold standard, which will be a positive development. But unfortunately, it's going to be a very rocky road between where we are now and where we're going to end up.
All right, Peter. A little bit of optimism in there, not much, I would say. Let's hope that you're wrong on some of that. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.